We begin today with one of the more influential authors of, the past 100 years. He gave us stories about a man, but not just any man, an invisible man. Another story about a time traveler, then one about aliens attacking the Earth. Oh, and another about a doctor who lived on an island who you would never, ever want to visit for medical advice. And all of this on the way to answering the question, exactly what is it that connects H.G. Wells and butterflies? Welcome to the Sky Pilot podcast that explores questions of faith, spirituality, and religion. I'm Dan Matthews, and I don't have all the answers, but I do enjoy the questions. Welcome to the podcast where every question is an invitation into a spiritual quest, and you're invited along for the journey. As I prepared for this particular episode, I thought about the works of H.G. Wells for obvious reasons. Now, before I mention his notable creations, let me remind you of the era in which he lived, because it relates to this podcast and what I'm getting ready to say in a minute. He was born in England in 1866. He died 79 years later in 1946. And I couldn't begin to recount all the things that he wrote because he was so prolific as a writer. But just to quickly refresh our memories, he's the author of such classics as The Invisible Man, The Island of Dr. Moreau, The War of the Worlds, and The Time Machine. His novel, The Island of Dr. Moreau, was also turned into a movie in 1977. Matter of fact, a lot of his stuff was turned into movies. War of the Worlds movie was produced in 1953. The Invisible Man has been turned into a movie several times and also inspired a television series in the mid to late 70s that was entitled, this one's complicated, I always forget it. Oh yeah, The Invisible Man. Then, of course, the movie The Time Machine was released in 1960. Now, I'm coming to a point here, I absolutely promise. I was born in 1961, and these were truly the formative stories of my youth. I may not have been born when any of these were being written and released, but that made them in some ways even more formative because a number of these movies were produced before I was born, but were being played on television with some frequency in my youth. And so I got to watch them many times. And then some of these were released right as I was most obsessed with movies, 15 to 16 years old, something like that. I watched The Island of Dr. Moreau. Well, I watched that one once, and then I stayed awake for a solid week. That movie was, for me, beyond disturbing. War of the Worlds is one I've watched many times. I love that movie. There's a good reason, matter of fact, why H.G. Wells is often cited as the father of science fiction. But he helped popularize more than just that. Or maybe it would be better to say that he popularized a subgenre of science fiction. He could also be called the father of time travel. Now, I know there are those who would probably argue, well, he can't be called that. He didn't invent the idea of time travel. But he was, without a question, the one who popularized it. And today we watch countless movies in this time that take that idea that he popularized and have made it, such a frequently reoccurring theme in movies, it could well be just called a trope. Think about the broad spectrum of types of movies and the breadth of time over which these time travel movies have been made. Yes, H.G. Wells' book, The Time Machine, was turned into a movie in 1960. Planet of the Apes, remember that movie? 1968, that's a time travel movie. Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban, that's a time travel movie. Even Star Trek reboot of 2009 was again a time travel movie. Now, arguably, the biggest star in Hollywood right now is Ryan Reynolds. Yeah, he made a time travel movie called The Adam Project. And then the two biggest time travel movie franchises of all time, Back to the Future and The Terminator, are two of the biggest franchises of all time, to be truthful. Even if you aren't a science fiction fan, you've probably watched quite a few time travel movies and never even thought about it because it's become just so darn common. We've watched so many of these things that most of us who've watched any of these movies can immediately begin to name some of the major problems with time travel. First, the one that is called the grandfather paradox. Now, if you travel back in time and you meet your own grandfather, what happens if you kill him? I mean, apart from the fact that you are really a strange, sick, twisted individual to travel all the way back in time just so you can kill your own grandfather. But if you kill your own grandfather prior to his ever getting married or having kids, then your parent would never have been born. And in turn, therefore, you never would have been born. So you couldn't have traveled back in time. So your father's and therefore grandfather are really still alive. It's because of paradoxes like this that some scientists believe time travel's not ever going to be possible. They believe that there are probably some elements of the physical universe that would prevent it because its existence would just plain create way too many problems. But the issue of killing grandparents is not really one that comes up with much frequency in the movies. What does come up is two basic rules. And if you've ever watched any sort of time travel movie, these rules often get mentioned. One, never make contact with yourself in the past. If you're watching, though, a time travel movie that mentions this in the dialogue as an important rule to follow, just know that it's going to be broken at some point during the movie. That seems to be a pretty hard and fast rule of time travel as well. Anyway, it's the best that I can tell. I think it is a rule. You have to break that rule if you mention it. Finally, there is often a point in modern time travel movies in which someone talks about the problem with time travel. Small and seemingly inconsequential events can have a ripple effect that's amplified through time, and therefore that action can have unforeseen consequences. If you watched the original Jurassic Park movie, you've heard the idea of chaos theory. You watched Jeff Goldblum play Ian Malcolm, who explains that the more complex a system is, the more tiny seemingly inconsequential events can have much larger and ultimately unpredictable outcomes. Hence, as it's known, the butterfly effect.
A butterfly can flap its wings in Peking, and in Central Park you get rain instead of sunshine.
A butterfly can flap its wings in Peking, and in Central Park you get rain instead of sunshine. Now, if you combine these two, time travel and the butterfly effect, you come to a realization that anyone who travels through time has the potential to create small ripples with enormous effect. You don't have to kill your grandfather. You've traveled through time to, say, visit the era of the flappers, just because you're curious and wanted to see what that was all about. While on your mission, you go to the diner for something to eat because, well, even time travelers get hungry and need food. You don't have money that will work in the 1920s because your money would be recognized as, well, it wouldn't be recognized at all, so it wouldn't be taken. So you eat and then you ostensibly go to the bathroom, but really sneak out the back door without paying. The waitress who is serving you is now forced to pay for your meal by the manager who runs the restaurant before he then fires her. She now has to go look for a job instead of taking her son to the science fair, where he would have won first prize and been inspired to pursue a career in medicine, during which he would have discovered a medical breakthrough that would eventually later to lead someone to discover the cure for diabetes, saving untold lives, preventing an incalculable amount of suffering. All of that fails to happen in the future because of your little jaunt through time. Of course, equally possible is that you don't skip out. You've managed to plan for the fact that you will need money, and you leave her a tip, a generous tip, which places her in a good mood for the science fair. Her son, feeling supported and in a good mood himself now, dazzles the judges and is offered a place in the local math and science school. He goes on to even greater things, the cure for diabetes being only one of a series of dramatic, world-changing discoveries that come about because of his work. Now, unless you haven't been to a movie in the past 30 years, there's nothing here that surprises a single person watching this podcast. We all are very well aware of the unique ability that someone traveling through time has, their ability to dramatically alter the future. Now, there's a but here. Here's the part that really pertains to this particular podcast. There's nothing inherently related to time travel in all of this. Most of us who have watched movies that revolve around time travel know that anyone traveling through time has, as we've said, the ability to dramatically affect the future with their actions. But what most of us forget in that process is that it doesn't take a time machine or a distortion of the space-time continuum, as Star Trek The Next Generation likes to say, for this to happen. You are already a time traveler. That's my William Shatner. You are already a time traveler. You are traveling through time, your time, right now. And your actions have every bit the ability to affect the future as much as they would if you did have a time machine and you went back 200 years. The real lesson of all of our time travel stories is that our choices, even our small and seemingly inconsequential choices, have the potential to have enormous effect on the future. The Peking butterfly theory is that the tiny breeze created by the wings of the butterfly in China may be so amplified over time that it changes the weather in New York City. And that butterfly was not a time traveler. What this says to me is that though we can't be absolutely sure, things have a tendency to amplify in their original direction. My point, the slight breeze of those wings of the butterfly became a weather pattern. It didn't become a new mountain. So, though there are no guarantees, positive interactions, kindness, generosity are most likely to get amplified into more positivity, generosity, and kindness. Consequently, negativity, aggression, and hostility are more likely to lead to negative results. Now, I guess you could find all of this a little intimidating. Your actions today may have far-reaching and unknown consequences on future generations. But I choose to see it differently. We, as the time-traveling people of this era, have the ability to send positive influence rippling through times into the future, potentially being amplified as the years progress. You have the amazing power to make the world of the future a better place. And all it takes is just the simple choice to be kind, or generous, or thoughtful, all in small ways that can make a big difference into the future. That's all for today. Today's podcast is not one of those controversial subjects that I expect to spark debate. Instead, it's intended to be one of those where you say, oh, I never thought about it like that. But it's kind of obvious now that I hear it. It also gives us a little more motivation, hopefully, to be who God is calling us to be. Sometimes it's easy to find yourself wondering, why even be kind or generous if all that happens is it goes unappreciated, unnoticed in the time that I did it? But this is a reminder that the effects of your love, kindness, and generosity might not be seen by you or even by much of anyone else, but may very well have a powerful, positive influence on future generations to come. Now, if you have a comment, a response, or a question for a future episode, or if you disagree with what I just said, I would love to hear from you. My email address is dan@skypilot.zone. Also, click on the like button for me. I also invite you to subscribe to this so that you can be notified of future episodes. And on your spiritual journey, may you ask questions, seek answers, and boldly go wherever the quest takes you. Thanks for joining us here today and being part of the SkyPilot Faith Quest community. This is a great place to ask questions you wouldn't feel comfortable or safe asking in other places. And remember, the sign of a strong faith, solid religion, or healthy spiritual journey is not certainty, but that you keep asking questions.